Chelsea Ann. I feel like I have to say both of those names at the same time. You're one of those people that maybe
I'm
you're Chelsea Ann O'Brien every time I talk to you. But I'm so looking forward to this conversation. You are doing such gorgeous work in the world, and I want to hear all about it. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Wendy, I love your podcast. I'm so excited to talk with you. You are definitely in your femininity and everything that you're doing. And I love you going to France. I'd like to hear where you go in France because that's Mary Magdalene's land.
Oh,
And
yes.
I wrote a book there actually. Like I went to Mary Magdalene's cave.
You did?
I did, and I can show you how to get there. It's very hard to find. And I was kind
Okay.
of guided up the path. It's a path, it's unmarked, and
Okay.
it's in a certain part of France. And it's right off of like maybe a couple hours from Nice. You have to rent a car and you have to kind of go there. And then you ask, and you'll get guided up that hill. And there's a cave at the top. And
Okay.
it makes my heart pound thinking about it. But I went in there and it was like I went through a process, a transformational process, which we'll talk about today. And in
Please.
that cave, I swear I received not the books we're talking about today, but I've written 5 books as a woman. Just they come through me. So it's not thing
So
complicated for
good.
me. It's my passion. And I never thought they'd go anywhere. And then I'm like, oh, these last two are very good. But that book was called Fertile. And it's
Okay.
really about that land is very ancient and it's about conscious conception for women. And so I'd love to hear where you are in France, but I'll talk about just right off the bat, I could tell you
Please
we have a
go.
lot in common.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. My trips are Paris and Normandy, Paris and Versailles, and then I'm in southwestern France in the
Okay.
Charente-Maritime, so near Bordeaux
Yeah.
and Cognac.
Yeah. I'll have to
Yeah,
send you
so
this
I'm
location later though.
yeah, that's so cool. I'll
Yeah.
definitely make a little side trip over there. That sounds amazing. How did you even come to this? I mean, I feel like there's not like a great awakening that says, I would like to go on a culinary trip to Paris. Like, but there is a great awakening that says, how do I find this unmarked path to this cave and
Yeah.
be
There's
in
so
this
many
place?
points. I think Maslow in his hierarchy says or I don't remember which theorist, but there's like peak experiences in your life when
Okay,
you're kind of headed towards self-actualization. And I would say I've had a few of those. And I would love to talk about those today, actually. They
please.
kind of came up before I was like walking around the house. I was like, what should I tell her? And then we can jump into those. But I'll introduce myself. My name is Chelsea Ann, and I've been going by that because my mom named me that, and I like the two together too. And so
Beautiful.
I'm a mother. I live right outside of Manhattan, and the journey to get here was quite a journey, a spiritual one. And I am a practitioner, so I'm really grounded in medicine. I work with menopause patients right now, so I like to help women through transition. So birthing, I did birthing, reproductive medicine. I've done integrative medicine, so alternative approaches to health, and now I'm doing menopause work. And I also write books for women. My 2 first books were really on conscious conception because I found that there was a gap in motherhood. So many gaps in motherhood, really, that mothers aren't appreciated. And then also that nobody teaches you how to be a good mother. And there's a lot of generational patterns we have to let go of in order for the next generation to become who they're supposed to be.
Great.
And
Oh my
then,
gosh, I have chills all over my
yeah, there's
body.
so
This
much to
is,
talk about.
buckle up, ladies. This is going to be like a 5 hour podcast.
Yeah, I have extra time. Actually, my patient just
Great.
canceled. So I was like,
Yeah.
wow, we could keep going.
My other person canceled too.
Oh,
So
funny, because
I
it
think,
just canceled. And I was like, oh,
mhm,
that was God. But then my most recent books that are everything's available on Amazon for all of you to pick up. So my most recent books, The Feminine Effect and The Feminine Frequency, are really my best books. And I guess I'll start with a peak experience that I was sitting in a room with one of my spiritual teachers years ago, 10 years ago, before I went on the trips and all these spiritual adventures occurred. And the woman said out loud in the class, if the frequency of women changes, so will the entire human race, because women are
mm,
the ones who birth the children in this world. And I don't think anybody else in that room really heard what I heard. And it felt like my entire destiny fell into me. Like it just felt from the ground. And I went on a pursuit to figure out what that meant.
oh,
And then I began to meet different people traveling all over the world. And one of the people I met was named Abdi. And it's a long story of how I got there, but the feminine effect they the feminine effect and the feminine frequency both teach the reader the same concept in different ways of approaching it. So if you're more in your heart or you need an emotional story, you've gone through a transition and you feel like you're not in your femininity, the
Mm,
feminine effect is a creative nonfiction that takes you through a journey, a woman's journey of what it is to be out of your nature as a woman. And then the
mm,
journey to return there. So, an example would be like if you go through a divorce, if you're going through infertility, if you're having health issues like autoimmune problems, hormonal imbalances, I mean, you name it, like
yeah.
mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual issues, a lot of the time it comes down to women becoming like men and taking on identities
Mm,
that are taking on so many outside identities to try to feel in balance, to try to finally heal and not understanding. Like when someone said to me, when Abdi said to me, "You're not in your nature," I didn't understand what that was at the time. And so I went through a spiritual process to return to my nature, and then I documented it in that book.
oh,
And then
wow.
the next book, Feminine Frequency, it's a much easier read. Basically, it's 27 sections of what a woman is like when she's not in her nature, giving clinical examples and emotional
Mm,
examples, and then the path to get there, and then what it looks like when you do become more feminine. What does that mean? What is we don't have any definitions of what it is.
right, right. It's not you chose the pink blouse instead of the black one.
And it's not just wearing a dress. And so
Right.
because we've become so masculine from the feminist movement, and we can talk and we can go in so many directions around all of this, and I'll let you lead,
Okay.
but I'm here to speak about it.
Hey, I think that's so fascinating. Let's let's talk about you mentioned conscious conception.
Yeah.
I've never heard those two words together.
Okay.
I experienced all the years of infertility and I just, obviously what I know now about spiritual and universal laws and about being in personal alignment and all of these things, it makes sense
Hmm.
what my past experiences have been.
Hmm.
But I'm really interested in that phrase and that concept because I believe that it would require kind of an understanding of conscious conception that would lead to conscious parenting, that would lead to,
Conscious femininity.
yes.
But really, the feminine effect and the feminine frequency should have come first, but
Mm,
my consciousness needed to adapt to change to that.
sure.
And then they all tie in together. So all the books actually
Yeah.
tie in together because it really goes back to if you're really ready to conceive, whether that's becoming, conceiving a book or conceiving a baby or conceiving anything,
Exactly.
your elements are in balance: fire, air, earth, water, ether. And we can talk about those about, the physical and emotional imbalances that can occur. That's
Sure.
ancient. That's, we could go to talk about it through Chinese medicine, right?
Yeah.
But conscious conception for me is changing the generational patterns that have been passed from one generation to the next that are creating trauma. So, right now, if you look at social media, the triggering posts we're seeing is really about narcissism, and it's narcissism within families. And if we look at what narcissism is and what is the rise of that, so feminine frequency ties back into all of what conscious conception is. So, what is the rise of narcissism? Why do we see this so often? Like, why are we seeing these terms? What does it mean? And so I looked at it and I looked at the depth. I'm going to go back to conscious conception, but I'm going to tie
Please
in some really controversial subjects right now because it's going to be
bring
really
it,
triggering for a
Queen.
lot of women.
Yeah.
If you look at the definition of feminism and you look at the definition of narcissism, the words actually tie in that they match in the dictionary, and it's really kind of shocking. And
Right.
I kind of began to question that because I've met a lot of wonderful mothers, and then I met a couple of really bad mothers. And I'm
Mm,
like, why is that woman not a healthy mother? And what made her become unconscious?
mm,
So I believe that women have gone into survival
yeah.
and taken on when we decided that in order to become successful, we had to be independent, financially independent.
Right.
We then left our roles of motherhood and made values outside of the house to be more important. And
Sure.
from there, I think that motherhood has become a little bit less unconscious each time because our values have changed, right? And we can
Yeah.
talk about, the programming during pregnancy and what the thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and diet can affect when the
Yeah.
baby's born. I mean, within the pregnancy period. But women have taken on these personality traits such as manipulation, such as envy, such as competition,
Yeah.
entitlement, and like almost like a war battle. And I think it's because we've gone into survival by trying to do so much and thinking that the power lies in becoming like a man in society and not seeing what our power is in our femininity. And so
Right.
all of these books tie together to create this more conscious woman that can
Mm.
also transfer to being more conscious within your family unit. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean you have to be a mother, but it really means that within your family unit, you're a healthy tree so that your orchard can grow healthy apples and be very successful.
Yes. And like you said, it's not birthing babies. I mean, I and so many of my listeners are past that
Yeah.
in capability and or desire. And but in this midlife reinvention or reawakening or just doing what I'd like to do for a change, whatever
Right.
anyone wants to call that, there
Right.
is a birthing of something new. And if we haven't attended to our mindset, to our desire, to our femininity,
Hmm.
we can go the same route that we did when we were trying to birth our babies
Hmm.
and not learn what is going to actually have this be the vibrational match for the women we are now.
Yes. And that's why I work with transitions. So let me start with my story and then I think people will relate to it. And because I'm very vulnerable and in the feminine effect I really discuss my story. So um oh man, I met my first husband when I was 17, right? And maybe 18. And the book starts out like that. It's really written like a movie. And I happened to marry into quite a wealthy family. So on the outside, I had everything. There couldn't be a thing I didn't have. I mean, it was quite a life. And but it felt like I could never, always had a dangling carrot in front of me. So I'm
Mm.
constant. I mean, my husband, was my ex-husband, who was incredibly ambitious, right? But then he met me and became, rather than being like in a balance, I went into competition with him in my own. He didn't even know what was
Mm.
happening. And I
Right.
didn't know why I was doing it either. But I
Yeah.
think it's a program from my childhood, a program from unhealed things from my own childhood, and
Sure.
unhealed programs from society
Yeah.
that, it was never enough. The dangling carrot, I could never feed the monster inside. So
Yeah.
beyond having enough money, both of us were always after more of everything. So more education, more classes. So once I got the highest in my education in my field, then I said, oh, that's not enough. I have to become a yogi. And so then, of course, I took every training to become, the most like perfect yogi there could be for 7 years. And then I'm taking every single course. And I know that women that are listening are like, what am I looking for? That I'm looking for the next thing. I'm looking for the next thing. And it was never enough. So I'm in this marriage. And even when we were living in Europe, I just began to travel to all these sacred sites around the world, knowing I was looking for something more. What was that?
Right.
Well, the story goes on in these sacred sites, we began out with me in Mary
Yes.
Magdalene's cave. I was in the Himalayas. I went to Egypt. I mean, I went to every
Wow.
single sacred site around the world that I could possibly go to because I felt like I was missing something. What am I missing? And
Mm.
as I'm doing that, I'm also coinciding, like writing these books on motherhood, on conscious motherhood, but not seeing how unconscious my own motherhood was, despite trying, despite trying. So finally, I left that marriage, which was quite a story. And I realized I had worked on him for so many years.
Mm.
Despite looking like I'm working on myself, I was
Yeah.
really focused on him. So then I had to go through the dark night of the soul to find myself. And I was working with this man named Abdi Electricite. He's an incredible logical male. I went to him and I said, I need help. Will you heal me? Will you teach me? I've lost everything. I lost all my money. I've lost my entire identity. I've moved across the world. I have these two daughters. I don't know what happened to my life. Like I have all this education. I've taken all these courses. I have all the money. What's wrong? And he looked at me and he said, Chelsea Ann, you are out of your nature. And I looked at him and I said, what is my nature? And that's where these books were born. And so he says, I'm going to take you through a transformational process, a spiritual one, and it'll take you 6 months to a couple of years, and it will take other women 10 to 20 years because you can handle it quick. And he's
Okay.
like, and it's a process of letting go of all the identities that you have taken on, thinking that those are going to give you solace in who you are and your re-identification. It's
Mm,
actually emptying, it's not gathering. And
right.
so in the feminine effect, I document the process of all the things you have to let go of and almost empty yourself of to return to your femininity in order to gain back all the power of the feminine, which we can talk about. I'm in a space
Right.
because I can keep going, but I want to hear
Yeah.
what you think.
No, it's so fascinating. And I can feel like where the tension would be.
Yeah.
Because even when we're gathering and we are seeking what's next, what it's going to be this person, it's going to be this mentor, this course, this certification, this degree, this whatever house, depending on what people are looking to fill that space.
Mhm.
And then to hear, no, it's an emptying. It sounds like, no, 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 that can't be it, even though we've just experienced that the gathering wasn't it. So it's a fascinating space to be aware
Mhm.
in and of, and to trust and surrender that this is a path that is going to help us identify what it is we're even trying to
Well,
figure out.
right. And when you go through something like a divorce or you're going through a life transition, we look outside of ourselves and we look to society or we look to what other people have done. And now, because we're all defined by the masculine values, and that was defined by, feminism, to be honest, we
Right.
don't know what it means to be a woman. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this. But so we think it's the next course. And because spirituality for most people is a business, we're
Hmm.
looking to other people that we think is, like, oh, they must know, or they must know,
Right.
where is my happiness? And so when you go through these moments where it's, a rock bottom, which a divorce or a sickness or a cancer or, one of these events are, which I see women in the clinic all the time. They come to me, I'm working 70 hours a week. I don't know my daughter, or I don't know why I have autoimmune issues. Or I don't know why I'm infertile. I don't, like that's, so I'm seeing it on a clinical level. I'm seeing it on a spiritual, like when people have a spiritual breakdown or when they have a breakdown within their family unit, why are we so out of balance? Well, in my theory is that women aren't women anymore. And so
Mm.
we find that money, our career. If we look at what we find to be important, it's all masculine values on a general level. Money, career, house, car. And I'm not saying I don't like all those things. I have a
Sure.
career. But what
Right.
I find to be most powerful, the more I let go of like the yogi, the person who needs to have more degrees, the person,
Right.
that reads a book in order to find knowledge, the more I let go of that stuff and I create more space in my life, even in those rock bottoms, I don't gather, I release. And from there, I create the space to be able to tap back into my intuition, to be able
Mm.
to heal the generational patterns of the trauma, right?
Right.
To be able to touch
Yeah.
into the subconscious, to be able to astral travel, the power of just our dreams and touching into those things. And this isn't really woo-woo. I think
No.
that we're all intuitive. I think that we're
Yeah.
all magical. I think that the power comes from our heart opening process. And so the pain of these events, which maybe takes your career away, takes your husband away,
Mhm.
actually break your heart so much that your heart can finally open. And then you can touch into that power of the femininity,
Right.
which is in
Right.
the nothingness. And then we can talk about conscious conception, which then, if you can get to that, you'll find that if you're a mother or you're a leader within your family or you're a leader within your community, which is all forms of motherhood,
Right.
that you're like, that's what will change the next generation. So conscious conception and conscious motherhood are the same thing as what it really is healing the trauma that's been created epigenetically.
Right. And even when you made the comment, like this is not woo-woo, it's that is also a belief that shuts down this practice, this trajectory of us actually stepping into our power.
Yes, yes. It's not woo-woo. So, but I do think that on social media, some women are making it woo-woo and tapping into everyone's like kind of the picturesque drawing. Like it's like I studied art history. I love looking at art, you know? And so if you look at social media, a lot of it is art. And so you'll see that the women want this. They want someone to teach them how to get there. What does it mean? What am I missing? I know I'm
Sure.
acting like a man, but I don't have anyone to teach me how to return, right? So they
Right.
look to these trad wives, or they look to these spiritual women that maybe they're going, you know, like they're traveling and they're doing like ceremonies and or they're gathering the herbs from the garden. And we think and we're looking at that as modern day art of femininity. But what it
Mm,
really is it's looking at the mental, emotional, and spiritual and physical aspects of ourselves that are out of balance.
yeah.
And seeing all of the identities we've taken on, which for me personally was like, I am taking on identification of healer, for example. Like, so let's say you're a good healer. I am a good healer, right? But now I don't identify with it. I could lose my career
Hmm.
and it wouldn't hurt me. I'd be like, oh, okay. But most people, if you lose it, you would be on the floor panicking, shaking. If someone loses their job, it's the biggest thing. If they lose their husband, it's the biggest identification. Like changing from being in a relationship to being single. That's a massive identity shift, right? Changing from being, you know, like when your children leave the house or when you
Sure.
change, you know, change transitions, can you go back into your authenticity as a woman and let all of those outside identities go so that you can really anchor back into yourself? And what is that? And most women don't know what that is. So,
Right.
and if you don't heal the past, so all of these books, what they do as a combination is take or people, I said patients, but take people through the journey of healing these past wounds epigenetically so that you're so clean, you know, that you can conceive this new world. Or for your, what your interest is like rebirth this new life into this new transition. And for me, it's really about like returning to your femininity so that none of it really matters.
Right. So how do we do that? Especially if it's going to take 10 years. Like, stat. What do we, because I
Well,
also, it's not like I know I'm saying, like, how do we do it? And all of that is the conditioned masculine approach of, like, okay, what action do I take to get into my intuition? And I know that that sentence doesn't even make sense. So what are you guiding the reader to who wants to be in her full femininity, who wants to be fully expressed, who wants to feel safe and expansive and empowered in that?
yeah. So let me give you a few examples. So if I were to say this to, let's say a patient is sitting in front of me because I still work with patients daily and now it's menopause and that's a great, we're both in
Sure.
transitions, right? You and I both work, I
Yep.
always have worked with people in transitions,
Yeah.
even with death. It's just what I love and or what I'm gathered to do. But let's say someone, if I were to say to a woman that wasn't ready to hear it, you're out of your nature, she would look at me with glassed eyes
Hmm.
and not understand a thing I'm saying.
Right.
So this isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
But my understand, and I, you know, like for example, I tried to tell my sister, well, maybe, you know, certain things in life, maybe even for women that drink too much, or they are having fights in their marriage, or they don't know what's wrong. Like there's the beginning track of it where something feels a little bit off, and you
Hmm.
don't know what's off, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it will eventually will manifest physically,
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah. Don't worry,
Always
it'll get
manifest
bigger.
within, you know, power dynamics within your relationship. So one way to begin to see is like you're in competition with your husband, but you're not aware that you're in competition with him.
Mm.
And then you begin to see the personality traits we talked about earlier that are discussed in the feminine frequency, which are, you see manipulation in other people. You can identify when someone else is envious. You can see when another woman is competitive, or just all these kind of like narcissistic traits we've taken on.
Sure.
Rather than seeing them and projecting them that it's the other person, begin to use relationships in your life to say, what about this relationship can I use to learn to grow within myself? So, in
Right.
all of these books, I teach how relationship, whether it's with a man or with a female, can show the parts of yourself as a mirror that need to grow. And
Mm.
I show it really, really, really well. So if something is triggering you within another person, let's say you're dating. So an example in the feminine effect, I went through the divorce and I just gave examples of dating someone, and it was right after a divorce. So you're in it, and I should have never
Yeah.
dated. I should have gone into the space I'm teaching right now, but you
Sure.
can learn from my mistakes. But it's, you see the parts of yourself you need to heal and you don't like it, but it's that person that's showing you the places that you need to grow. So
Right.
first off, first step is to create space in your life day to day. So that would be in the morning, in the
Mhm.
evening, week by week, month by month. Number two, use relationships to as a mirror, and you can go right to my books to understand it. Number three, look at if narcissism is so big of a topic and so controversial, and the word toxic, which I hate that word, is, so look at, with rather than talking about it with other people, look at the places that you can heal.
Mm.
And then, of course, in my other books, I talk about like generational patterns. How do you heal it? How do you identify with it? How does the mother figure and the father figure affect you? And if you haven't healed it, it's gonna keep coming up in your life in some sort of a form.
Right.
So
Right.
back to, where do you begin? Well, first off, you have to be ready.
Yeah.
And usually it takes a moment of rock bottom,
Sure.
unfortunately. So a lot of the times it's a loss of a relationship or a loss of a career. Well, someone will identify, or a sickness.
Sure.
Somebody identifies something's wrong. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to pinpoint it. Can someone teach me and lead me how to get out of this?
Sure. Because I can see where we might say the issue that happened, like the identifier of before the divorce and after the divorce, the now like time marker, that is that's a symptom of
Hmm.
what's happening. That
Hmm.
is not the disease. Like that's not the thing. And now that that's behind us, you're just whole. Like that
Hmm.
there is work to be done in how, just in my own experience, like how am I co-creating this life that is not delighting me and it's not delighting him either. Like there and so working through what I needed to do about that. But
Hmm.
it wasn't just, oh, I need to not be in this marriage. Okay, check. Now that's not the same as being healed. That's just like we've stopped the bleeding, is what's
Hmm.
happening there. So what are your suggestions for moving, like to not identify the conditions and the removal of the conditions and not confuse that with the healing?
I don't really, maybe you'll have to restate the question, but
Okay.
you started with relationship, and then you'll have to repeat that question. Let me
Okay.
begin by
Please.
starting with relationship and being, it sounded like the question began with starting within relationship and how do you handle that? So, well, first off, let's identify like what female and male frequency is. So right now, a female is the only species born a female that can emit the female frequency on this planet. And males can only get the feminine frequency from another woman or from other women in their life. So they're always looking for a woman that emits that frequency. Or I'm saying the word frequency, we can call it energy. And
Okay.
what is that? So most women now are only emitting a male energy.
Mm.
And so, and what I mean by male energy is their heart is really closed and they lack feeling. They're really reactive. So like what we were talking about, the second part of the question is like Rather than feeling things, they react. And that's because their heart is closed from specific things that happened within their childhood that they never went through. And so
Okay.
I think one of the mistakes is that therapy is wonderful to bring things up, but
Hmm.
it doesn't get to the subconscious. So oftentimes you need therapy in conjunction with energy work or therapy in conjunction with subconscious work. And that's controversial because nobody wants to hear it, but therapy is based on logic. And the feminine is very complicated. We're multi-layered and it goes back into memories you might not be able to consciously remember that are, 95% of our programming and our reactions are based off subconscious programming from our childhood. And if that was painful, it's going to play out in your relationship until you're in balance. So any insecurity you have in a relationship, so if there's problems within a relationship, and the other person, you bring up the problem and the other person doesn't accept it, that means that there's a lack of respect occurring. But
Mm.
relationships are really about bringing up the insecurity within each other so that it can be healed. But if you bring up an insecurity within one person and the other person can't meet you there, that means you're never going to move forward, right?
Right.
So I think a lot of relationships could be saved if the woman was actually in their femininity. And I believe that my first marriage would have been saved had I not been in such a masculine way of being. So
Mm.
my to define what the masculine way of being and my conditioning is, back to the question, is I thought I my definition of success, despite having enough money, both of us felt like we never had enough money. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yep.
And so success was defined by financial success, or for him, it was building a massive company, which never ended. So if the first step would be to redefine what success is for you based
Mm.
on what your nature is and based on what you can actually acquire. So if you're always defining success by something outside of your means, it's always the dangling carrot. So that's one step to redefining your conditioning. Does that make sense, or was that
Sure.
too complicated?
No, I understand.
So you have to redefine what success is within your relationship. And as a woman, so if let's say if people are listening and you're like in your marriage and you're deciding whether or not to stay, work on yourself and work on all the things that make you more masculine that you're not even aware of. And then when you be, so that basically it's going back into feeling to touch into your femininity. It's
Mm.
creating more space in your life so that you can feel more. It's focusing on connections and family over career,
Mm.
unfortunately. But we're programmed that career is more important, but I'm challenging that. It's like writing. If you write with your right hand, you got to begin to write with your left hand. If you're always crossing the street on the right side, you cross the street on the left side. So everything you're doing, you have to begin to do the opposite of. Because
Mm.
that's what you'll do if you leave the relationship anyway. So if you leave that marriage, you're going to start to do things opposite. So do it while you're in the marriage
Sure.
and surprise him and see if he can then see the new you that's more in your femininity, which is actually doing less and not competing with him.
Right. Right. Thank you for that. Yes, what I was, my question was evolving while I was talking as well, which happens. So, yes, making those changes but also if the marriage ends, it's not the end of the work. It's not the thing. It's the thing that, it's the relationship that made us aware
Hmm.
of what we were unconscious to. But just because the relationship is no longer there, it doesn't mean that the healing or the ways that we can reconnect with ourselves, that work still happens.
Yeah, and I actually don't think we can control. I mean, I looked back in my book and I was like, was it a moment of sabotage that I left, or was it a moment of the highest spiritual, activity that I've ever had? Was it one of my peak experiences? It was a peak experience when I left, and I documented it. I was in Egypt. It's a story like a movie. It really does play, and then it plays out like a movie. It's really well written. But I look back at it and I'm like, was it a spiritual moment or was it a moment of sabotage? I don't think I
Mm,
could have controlled it either way. I had no choice. I don't believe in free will. I don't think, I don't believe in it. I just don't think it's possible. I know that it's very common to say, like, I created that. I think that's very egotistical to say, like, I kind of think it's like you can't really avoid it. You're gonna, and either you're single or you're in a relationship. The idea that it's better to be one or the other or it's worse is based on society. So
totally.
everything I'm teaching right now is like, don't look to society for any sort of identification for what you think is right or wrong.
Yes.
Look to what is right in your heart. And there's, if you have to go through a moment of being singles or a lifetime of being single, it's just a lifetime. And that relationship, I often find with my own self is every time I give something up, so like it's a part of my personality. Like let's say I'm giving up, like I remember I was dating this man, it's part of the book. And he was when you date someone and it can be fun and it can, but then sometimes it's like, who is this person, right? And he was a child, okay? And I was doing his laundry and I was cleaning up his dishes and he couldn't take the garbage out and then he couldn't set up his own appointments and then he wasn't paying his taxes and I just met him. I mean, really getting to know him and I'm like, and then the moment I gave up the identification of being the mother, like I had an identification of, I had written books on motherhood. I had helped mothers all over the world. I was taking private clients. Like I was a healer, and then
Sure.
I remember it almost like the identification left my body. It was a spiritual
Mm,
experience. And I started laughing so hard of like, how could I compartmentalize
yeah.
being a mother in these other parts of my life where I'm writing about it, I'm researching it, and then not attract it in a man. So
Sure.
at the moment, you can't. So that's what I mean by look at your, I mean, until it happens to you, you're not going to be able to laugh. You're going to be really frustrated with yourself. But if
Right.
you're having an experience with somebody, it's because your ego or your sense of self gets something from it.
Mhm.
So I probably was getting something from taking care of a grown man because I
Sure.
had the identification of being the most responsible person in the world and just so good at mothering. And the moment I laughed at myself, I was like, if I think I'm that, I'm going to attract it everywhere. I have to give it up.
Totally.
To give it up. I
Ah,
gave the whole thing up for a period of time. I literally walked away from my books. I walked away from my career. I walked away from the relationship so that I could see myself separately in this space where
mm.
that identification didn't exist so that I could recreate myself.
Oh, that's really cool.
If you think of how many places it transfers over, so let's say, like, let me give another example. I find with my patients that anxiety,
Mhm.
which is like the number one diagnosis I see every single day because I've worked with women for 15 years or more, maybe more. And what is it? There are real pathophysiological reasons of having anxiety, and there are spiritual, mental, and emotional. But a lot of times it's women that are trying to connect to their intuition and they don't know how.
Mm,
And so sometimes that wanting to connect, so we're talking about how do you gain these feminine traits? So intuition, etc., or like the knowing. That's a deep
yeah.
ancient feminine trait. We all know. But sometimes now in modern day, I think anciently, not that's not a word. I think in older times, women always knew. And
Mhm.
we were the people that everybody would go to for
Sure.
guidance, right?
Yeah.
In tribes. Now we sometimes know and we sometimes don't know, right? But we still think we know. We
Mm,
still think we're right. And so that's what's created this kind of like narcissistic culture of birthing both men and women that keep on taking on these traits of like, I'm right, I'm never wrong. That's the number one reason of like not admitting your own fault is pride, right? And so wanting to be intuitive then comes out as the trait of controlling your environment and controlling everybody around it. So you may be
mm.
really good at control within your job, but you can't let go of it when you leave your job. So you're controlling, you like say you're a CEO, and there's a lot of women CEOs I work with, and they have to be controlling in order to be in a male role. You have to be controlling, you have to be logical, you have to be organized. But then it's hard to let that part of your personality go in your friendships. And it's hard to let that part of your personality go in your relationships or with your children. And so where does it end? You have to let it go within you. And then everything else balances out, and then you can tap back into your intuition.
Right. Oh my gosh. Okay. It's so good. I'm so glad you wrote books
Yeah.
because it's so good and it's helpful to have these guidelines and this journey documented so beautifully in story, because
Hmm.
then we can identify with
Hmm.
the character without like,
Yeah,
okay, where am I doing? It's when you're reading a story and something really resonates,
right,
it's because it's resonating. Like that
right.
is you getting your message. There's just so much here. Like I can see how these books just come through you.
Yeah.
How did the peak experiences and the Mary Magdalene cave, and where in the story do those happen
Oh,
in
okay.
your story?
I've had a few peak experiences in my life, and one of them, I mean, they happen in moments of meeting people or going to be guided to certain places. And I'll give you a couple examples. So, Ina May Gaskin is the most famous midwife in the world, and
Okay.
she's written a book called Spiritual Midwifery, and she kind of changed the game for women. And so, a lot of the home birthers out there, or, she she should never be forgotten. And I went and stayed at her farm in Tennessee, and she had just had a movie out on her created. And I sat by this woman, and so she was in the 1960s. She crossed the nation with her husband, and they started like one of the first like farms where they birthed all the babies on the way. They didn't have a birther, so they didn't have anybody. All these women were pregnant and they had nobody to birth the baby. So she read some books and she's like asked a doctor to teach her. She says, "Look, I'm living in this community and we are going to need help. And I teach me how to birth babies." So she met a doctor. He taught her how to naturally do it. And then saw that most she saw what was happening with women. She saw the condition of what was happening with women on the outside world other than her community. And they
Mm,
at that time they were in cages to get birth. I mean, they were going into the hospital and they were putting women in cages. Now, this is taken out of textbooks, but men were
right.
not allowed in the room. C-sections were rising. Right now, down in South America and Brazil, the C-section rate is close to 95%. I'm not precise, but they don't know how to naturally birth anymore. They have forgotten, right?
Wow.
So Ina May Gaskin sits there and she's holding my hand. And I'm like, who is this woman holding my hand? But she basically, in her books, taught women how not to forget natural birth. She
Mm,
documented something that was almost forgotten in time. Okay.
wow.
We were almost transferring out to having a birth naturally. And I mean, that means no Pitocin. And most people are like, what are you talking about? But there are going to be like 5 to 10% of women, 5%, that want to know how to do it. Right. So
Sure.
right now, I'm probably speaking to about 5% of women that don't want to forget their femininity. 95% of women are completely fine with heading down the masculine track until something happens in their life. So
Yeah.
maybe that 5% then turns into 10%, and that 10% turns into 15%. And I start to talk to more women and more women because right now everybody's doing really well, but perhaps there's a crash in economy. Perhaps everybody loses their jobs. Perhaps, something's going to happen where somebody hits rock bottom and they're going through that transition and they say, nobody's documented what it means to be a female. So if we're almost all becoming full masculine, where is the documentation in history? And that's where these things are. So peak experiences was one of them was meeting this woman, Ina McGaskin, who documented natural birth so that we didn't forget.
Right.
So later in my life, as my ex-husband and I moved to Europe, and in Europe, it's very different culturally. And we
Mhm.
lived in Ireland, and well, England, Ireland, basically. And I used it as a jumping point to go to all the sacred sites with my daughters around the world. And I
Sure.
went to India many times. And one of the times I went there, I went to this border of Pakistan and I ran these stairs of liberation. So you do these
Mm,
stairs and I ran it with all my friends. It sounds so crazy, but I'm in the middle of Pakistan and I'm driving with my car and I'm like, I hope I make it home to my kids because it's dark at night and I don't know who's driving us. And we all arrived at these stairs and they typically take people like 3 days to run, but we all ran it within 24 hours. So you don't get off the
wow.
stairs and you do this prayer and you jump in the water and supposedly it liberates 17 generations. From that moment
Oh,
on in my life, I became so clear, like almost like something washed over me and my trajectory changed from that. Um,
wow.
I went to the Dalai Lama's temple after that moment and I was on my knees before I was going to leave, literally, I'm at the bottom of the Dalai Lama's temple, and I read from there was a book called Conversations with God, Book 4.
Okay.
And it says in the book, I don't know why I'm telling you the story, but it
It's
was
so
such a
good.
fascinating
Yeah.
moment. And it says in the book to say this little prayer. And the little prayer is something like, I don't remember what it was, but now everybody can go read that book,
Yep.
Conversations with God, Book 4. And it says, I'll give up my life. I'll give up everything if you put me on my mission. Like I will give everything up for whatever I'm here to do. I'm sacrificing whatever it is. So at that moment in my life, I was married to a man who sold a company for almost $1 billion. So I had everything. I was traveling the world. I had access to homes all over. I had nannies. I had staff. I had everything you could ever want in the material world.
Hmm.
Did I think that God was going to make me really give it all up? No. But 9 months later, I end up in the Great Pyramid and I met a man named Abdi Electricite. And that man is what brought this work out.
Yeah.
So said, one day you're going to teach women what it means to return to your nature. And these
Mm.
peak experiences of all these different places I've been
Yeah.
got me to the point that I was able to walk away energetically.
Mm. It's amazing. So in the feminine frequency,
Yeah.
where is that taking the reader?
Yeah. So the feminine effect is actually written to music, like a movie, and it's
Cool.
actually being read by a movie director.
Cool.
Yeah, right now, which is really, really cool. Hopefully that goes somewhere. You never know. I don't know if
Right?
but it's just like fun. It's exciting just to even
Yeah.
hear that. So it's written like a movie. And so the character remains unnamed and you can listen to the songs to have an emotional experience. Because what I'm trying to
Mhm.
bring out in women is all of these emotions. So at the beginning of
Sure.
that book, I say, you're going to hate me. You're going to love me. You're going to
Yeah.
think I'm entitled. You're going to get jealous of me. And by the end, you're going to open your heart. I guarantee it.
Mm.
And so every reader has said to me, I didn't believe you.
Yeah.
And by the end, I say, I start with my daughters and I end with my daughters. And I said, I'm writing this for you because no one ever taught me how to be a good mother, and no one
Mm.
ever taught me what it meant to have my heart open.
Yeah.
And so, what does that mean? And so, the process of opening your heart is incredibly painful. And
Mm.
it goes to these moments of these peak experiences, what we're talking about, but then it also goes into the death, into the suicides of life, into into the wars that we fight on this planet and what you personally have to go through and the pain you have to feel through divorce and all these different things to actually like clear all that history so you can become the conceiver, the conscious mother, right?
Sure.
And then the feminine frequency is written in a more logical form. So it takes
Okay.
on 27 sections, and that number has some significance. But it takes on 27 sections and it talks about what a woman is not based off like clinical
Mm.
examples. So you can read it and you can really identify on a more logical way. So you can open it up on any section and really understand what does a woman out of her nature look like, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
What is the process of getting into your nature? And then what is a woman in her nature? Why would you want to get there? What in your life
Sure.
changes? Like what's the purpose?
Right.
So it's really like you're wearing red glasses
Yeah.
and I'm going to put blue glasses on you. And then you're going to see something different. And you might see that you're in a wheelchair and that
Mm.
you might find that your power is what you've defined to be powerful, which is based on a man's world of success through career, success through, money, success through houses, success through the
Sure.
material world, isn't as powerful as you believe it to be. That
Mm.
power, as defined by the female, is much more powerful. And the fact that we have been tricked, like Eve, truly tricked to believe that that's more powerful than connecting to spirit, than to connecting to God, than the power of intuition and the power of our garden, the simple
Yeah.
things, the power of being a good mother and clearing the generational history and healing. Why in the world did we believe it? It makes me, and then when you realize, if you
Right.
actually realize how powerful you are, you will explode the water pipes in your house. You'll like that your energy becomes so big when you tap into your heart.
Oh my gosh. It's such big, beautiful work. I love it.
Yeah.
Please tell everyone where they can find and follow you, how they can get their hands on the books, all the delicious things.
Yeah. So I know your reader or your listeners are a little older, but if their children are having babies, my first books, which I actually wrote under a pen name, Pritamatma at the time, just under pen name, now I'm not writing under a pen name, but those books are called Mystical Motherhood and Fertile. And
Okay.
then I have another one, Alchemy of Becoming, but that's a little bit different of a discussion. And then The Feminine Effect and The Feminine Frequency, published under Chelsea Ann, are what we've really been talking about today. So the first
Right.
books are really for if you are having, someone who's having a baby and you want to learn about conscious conception, you want to learn about epigenetics during pregnancy, you want to learn about, I combine Western medicine and Eastern philosophy in those books to really ground these high spiritual topics.
Yeah.
And then The Feminine Effect and The Feminine Frequency are available in bookstores. They're available on Amazon and they're available on my website at Chelsea Ann Effect. And I am now taking private clients. So if anyone wants any personal guidance, happy to do that. And I'm opening that up now. I hadn't done that for some years, but yeah, Chelsea Ann Effect.
Oh, you're so generous. We will link everything down in the show notes.
Yeah.
I have loved this conversation, Chelsea Ann. Thank you so much for
Thanks for
being
having
here.
me.